All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the workshop on Are You Ready for Taking an Online Class? My name is Kevin Bonton-Ball, and I am one of the librarians here at Cuesta. And I've been teaching in online classes for probably about 8-9 years or so. So I have some familiarity with teaching online classes, and I've taken online classes myself as well. So what I wanted to talk with you all about in this workshop is what is online, a little bit about some of the tools you might need to be successful in online class, and what some of the characteristics that will help you be successful, and as well as give you some tips on some things to keep in mind when you're taking an online class so you can be sure to be successful in that type of environment or modality. I do have a handout that you've each received, and it gives you some tips on this as well of things that will help you be prepared and successful. And there's some questions on this that we might go through that talks about some of the myths around online classes. So first, let's just take a moment to talk about what is online, or distance education as it's sometimes referred to. And it's mainly a class that you would take on the computer, if you will. So it's unlike where you are now sitting in a classroom. You'd actually be sitting in front of a computer screen and accessing the class via the computer, or participating in the class via the computer. So it's very different than what many of us might be used to, where we actually walk into a room, sit down at a desk, and have the other students around us, have an instructor in front of us, and participate in that manner. It is more individual, where you are interacting with the class and your fellow students through your computer screen or through the class website in different forums or via email or other aspects like that. So you want to think about that as to whether or not you think that type of environment is well suited for you in how you learn, because it does require sort of different characteristics on the student's part in terms of learning styles, and some folks are very successful in that type of environment, others are not so successful. So it's something to think about. So one thing is helpful is to think about how you learn as a student and what type of environment is going to be best suited for you in that respect. Online, some of the characteristics that will help you be successful is if you are extremely organized as a student, you're going to be more successful in online class than if you're not very organized. Time management is also very important when it comes to an online class. You're going to be the one responsible for keeping track of due dates, following up on when things are you need to submit to the instructor, going in, logging in, and accessing the website on a regular basis. It's very different than what many of us are used to, where we show up, as we've said, to a classroom on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10:30 to 11:30, or Mondays and Wednesdays from a certain time. It's really up to you to keep track of your time, set a schedule for yourself, and try to adhere to that schedule so you can be sure that you will be successful in the class. Online classes, too, require a lot of reading and following of the directions. Oftentimes in the face-to-face class, you know, we come into the class twice a week or once a week, and the instructor usually provides us some kind of reminders, or some, you know, remember, your paper's due next week, or this assignment's due to me by this date. Well, you don't have that luxury in an online class. It's up to you to, again, sort of track when the things are due, create a calendar for yourself, and make sure you adhere to those deadlines, because you're not going to have someone continuously reminding you on a weekly basis or so when things are due and what you're responsible for that week. It's really up to you. I did want to show you that off of the Cuesta College website, we do have a web page or website devoted to distance ed. So you'll see right off here off the navigation, if you go to the distance ed website, it gives you some really useful information, and I would encourage you to explore around this site if you're thinking about taking an online class. It talks about what is distance education, what is online courses. One thing that's really helpful under the section For Whom is there is a little self-assessment survey that asks you some questions to see whether or not you would be the type of student that would be successful in an online class. And so I thought we would take a moment to kind of go through that. There's only 10 questions, so it doesn't take very long. But it really does talk about the types of characteristics and things you will need to be successful. And I just would point out, if the answer A for each question is the answer that you would want to answer to be most successful. So in other words, when you're looking at this, if A is the answer you would choose, then that's going to tell you that for that particular question, that means you are really prepared to take an online class. B means it's a little uncertain at this point, but you might be successful. And C is probably the least best answer for the particular question. So for example, my need to take this course is high, moderate, or low. So if it's high, immediate, you have a specific goal, that probably means you're somewhat driven, organized, you need to get this done, and you're going to be successful because you have to have it done, as opposed to, well, it could be postponed, and it's not really that important. You may not be that successful because you won't commit yourself the way you need to in the class to be successful. So feeling that I am part of the class is not particularly necessary to me, somewhat important, or very important to me. So again, because you're online and you're not in a classroom setting with other students and interacting in that way, if it's not that necessary to you, then you'll probably be okay in an online class. If that part is really necessary, feeling that you're part of the class, engaged in interacting with others, if that's very important to you, then online may not be the best environment for you to learn well in, because you're not in this type of setting. You're behind a computer screen in your pajamas, perhaps somewhere else. And that might be okay if that's how you learn well. I would classify myself as someone who often gets things done ahead of time, needs reminding to get things done on time, puts things off until the last minute. Remember we talked about time management and organizational skills. So if you get things done ahead of time, you're organized, you're on top of what's required of you when it's due, you're probably going to do okay. If you put things off until the last minute, or you need some reminding all the time to get things done, you might struggle a little bit in an online class because those mechanisms aren't in place the same way they are in the classroom environment or face-to-face environment. 4, classroom discussion is helpful or rarely helpful to me, sometimes helpful to me, almost always helpful to me. Again, online, you're by yourself in many cases, although there are discussion boards in most online classes where you type in responses to questions or respond to other students' responses or questions. It's different than being in a classroom where you're physically sort of present and talking and responding and that kind of thing. So you want to think about whether discussion is really helpful to you or not. Because even though you can read through all of the posts that students provide on their discussion boards, it's not the same as a discussion that's live going on right at that moment. Number 5, when an instructor hands out directions for an assignment, you prefer figuring out the instructions yourself, trying to follow the directions on your own, then asking for help as needed, having the instructions explained to you. So if you can figure things out on your own, the more successful you'd be in that type of online classroom. If you need things explained to you and then you have to ask for help, you might be a little less successful in that type of situation. Number 6, I need faculty comments on my assignments within a few weeks so I can review what I did. Within a few days, or I forget what I did, or right away, or I get frustrated. So this isn't to say that it takes instructors a few weeks or so to get back to you in an online class, but it really implies that if you need stuff right away, or you're going to get frustrated, or you forget what you did, oftentimes the turnaround in an online class might be a little bit longer than you would find in a face-to-face class. So you just want to think about how well you learn again, in that type of environment. 7, considering my professional and personal schedule, the amount of time I have to work on a distance education course is more than enough for an on-campus course, the same as for a class held on campus, or less than for a class held on campus. Oftentimes, the sort of sense is by many that, I can take an online class, it's going to be easier than in the face-to-face class. Well, that's most cases false. It's usually not the case. Usually it's more work for the student in an online class because it requires you to read a lot more, figure out when things are due, read through the instructions, do all of that yourself as opposed to sitting in the classroom and having the instructor kind of explain things to you, remind you of when things are due, and so on and so forth. And lecture, you know, usually you're in the classroom, the instructor lectures, you take notes. In an online class, in most cases, the instructor will have written out the lecture, which means you have to read the lecture. You don't get the same experience of hearing the instructor give the lecture unless they've videotaped it, which is, you know, possible and happens in some cases. But most cases, online is very text-based, heavy text-based. You're reading a lot of the information and trying to sort through it and figure it out yourself. Number 8, coming to campus on a regular schedule is extremely difficult for me because you have certain commitments, work, family, personal. It's a little bit difficult. You can rearrange your priorities to allow for that, or it's easy for me. So here's the convenience piece of distance education. So if it's really difficult for you to get to class on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 10 to 11, or Tuesday, Thursday from 2:30 to 4, because you have work commitments, or you have family commitments, or you have other things, then the convenience of online is really nice. And you might find that you know, that works for you really well, because given everything else you have going on and all of us have going on in our lives. But if it's not a problem, you can get to campus and that's, you know, you don't have anything else going on, then you might find that taking classes on campus in the classroom is going to work better for you. And number 9, as a reader, I would classify myself as good. I usually understand the text without help. Average, I sometimes need help to understand the text, or you're slower than average. So again, we've talked about this. This just goes back to the fact that in an online class, you really are spending a lot of time reading all the information and sorting through it yourself. And then lastly, when I need help understanding the subject, I'm comfortable approaching the instructor to ask for clarification. I'm uncomfortable approaching the instructor. I never approach the instructor to admit I don't understand something. So in an online class, you know, it's really up to you to, if you're not understanding something, you need to either send an email to the instructor or whatever means they provide for you to communicate with them. If it's on a discussion board, if it's via email, you need to be doing that on a regular basis to keep that contact if you're not understanding something. Because the instructor is not present like we are in the face-to-face class, so oftentimes they're not aware that you're not understanding anything. Sometimes in the classroom setting where we're all used to, the instructor might notice, that, you know, say, oh, you look like you're not quite understanding what we're talking about. Do you have a question on that? Or it's easy to walk up after class when everyone leaves and ask the instructor for clarification or prior to the class beginning. You don't have that same opportunity in an online class. It's really up to you to self-monitor yourself and figure out what is it that you're understanding, what do you need help on, and reaching out and communicating with your instructor and our fellow students if you get to know your students in online class. But all of that communication happens, you know, in a virtual world, either through email or discussion board or some other fashion. So you might come to this website. Again, it was off of the distance education website under For Whom, and take this self-assessment survey to see whether you are going to be successful or have the characteristics that would help you be successful in an online class. There's also some other resources on this website that you can explore at your leisure. There's a whole frequently asked questions section that might help you as you start going down the path of taking an online class. Let me talk a little bit about if you do decide that you want to take an online class. You would find the class in the schedule. It would be listed as online. You would register for that class. And one thing that's important, and there's a link from the distance education website, is to course welcome letters. Typically, when we sign up for a class, from the schedule, it tells us what days, times, and room the class meets in. That's not the case in the online class, right? You sign up for the class and then it's online. So where do you go? What do you need to have or do? And that's oftentimes communicated to you from the course welcome letter. So after you sign up, you want to go here to this page where it lists the welcome letters for each course that's offered in the term that's coming up for that class that you may have signed up for. And when you go to that welcome letter, so again, you signed up for Business 201B, you would look at that welcome letter or whatever the course may be. Let's go down to one of the ones that I teach, because I know there's a welcome letter there. Let's say you signed up for Library Information Technology 106, which is an Introduction to the Internet class. And you click on this link, it'll take you to this course welcome letter. So here, I'm the instructor for this course, but I've let the students know when the course begins. So in fact, this course, this is for next spring semester. It's a late start course. So it doesn't begin until March 19th of 2012. This lets the student know not to panic come the beginning of the spring semester when they haven't received any notification from me or they don't know what's going on. They sign up for this class. When does it start? They don't remember in the schedule that it said March 19th. So the welcome letter reminds them of when this course starts. Then it tells them that how I will communicate with them is via their MyQuesta email account. And we can talk a little bit about MyQuesta email accounts in a few minutes. And I will send them information a few days prior to the beginning of the class with the class website information, login, and password. And then it talks about some requirements, the textbook, some computer requirements that they would need for the class, and other things. So the welcome letters, we can look at another one. We'll just choose Health Ed 202 as another example. They're going to vary based on the instructor and what type of information they need to provide to the student and what types of things the students will need for that particular class. Initially, we probably should have, that one of the things obviously that you need is a computer or access to a computer for you to be able to access the website. So you shouldn't sign up for an online class if in fact you have no access on a regular basis to a computer or the internet. So if you don't have internet access at home, and you don't have a computer at home, then you might want to think about whether this online class is going to be right for you. But if you have access at home or at your parents' house or a friend's house or maybe the library, and you've got a schedule that you can get to that computer and use it on a regular basis, then great. You're going to need to have that. Also email. I don't think I mentioned that email is very important to have an email account. And every student, when you register for Questa, you have a MyQuesta email account. But I'm going to show you that, as I said, in a minute, because you can actually forward that email to a different email if you don't want to use the MyQuesta email account. And then, of course, a web browser, like we're using Firefox here to access the web. So you'll need some sort of web browser in addition to just having a computer. You need the right software on that computer. So this is the welcome letter for a health education course. It talks, what you need to do first and the student contact information and the basics and instructor's email address and name and whatnot. So again, they're just providing you with information. Welcome letters are really helpful because they're going to give you the pertinent information you need for that particular class to help you be successful from the beginning of the course. Because again, in the face-to-face environment, we all know, oh, I signed up for Health Education 2. It meets on Mondays at 10:30 in room 2802. And so you show up on Mondays at 10:30 in room 2802, and there's the instructor, and the information is given to you and all that. But online, it's not that easy. Usually it's either you as a student need to be responsible and proactive and go find out what you need to find out for that particular class, or hopefully the instructor is responsible and is sending out information to all of their students ahead of time as well to remind them, you signed up for this, you're on my roll, expect an email from me at this date, or here's the way in which you access the class and all of that kind of stuff that you might find. So I mentioned that you have a MyQuesta email account. Email is going to be critical. Most online classes use email in some capacity, one way or another. That's how the instructor will communicate with the students, or you as a student can communicate to the instructor or other students. So I'm sure you're all familiar with MyQuesta, and you've logged into MyQuesta because that's how you register and do other things. So I'm just going to show you quickly the email. So if I log in here, and you might already have used your MyQuesta email, Yours might look a little bit different because they do a different color scheme for staff than they do for students, but you log into MyQuesta and you go to the Student tab, and you look for this little, they call them channels or box here on this, under this tab that says Student Email available here. And so if you go there, it'll launch your email, and you can get into your MyQuesta email account. So it's really important to know about this. This is my MyQuesta email account. But what I've done, since I don't want to have to remember to log into MyQuesta and check my email there, and go into my Yahoo account and check my email there, and use my Charter account and check my email there, I can set this email up to be forwarded to a different email account. So if you're really used to just using your personal email account with whomever that may be with, or some other email, you can come into the MyQuesta, go into your email, and under Settings over here, you go to Mail Settings, and under your Mail Settings, you're going to see along here at the top, Forwarding. So if you go there, you can actually set your MyQuesta email to forward a copy of mail to, and you can put in here whatever email address you want to set up. So if you have a Yahoo email or a Gmail or some other email, just put that in, and then I've actually set it up to delete the email after it's forwarded to my email. So it's not building up in my MyQuesta email account, because if you don't delete it, what's going to happen is you only have a certain space limit in your email, and once you reach that, anyone who's trying to send an email to your MyQuesta email, it's going to get bounced back to them because your email box is full. It's reached its space limit. So that's how you can set up your email to have it forwarded to whatever email you choose. And that's probably really important because this is the email. All students get a MyQuesta email account. It's tied to faculty's rosters for the class. So if a faculty's trying to email you, they're going to go by your MyQuesta email. They don't know what your personal email is, right? They have no idea, so they're going to send it to the MyQuesta email. And if you're not at least logging in and looking at your email and you haven't set it up to be forwarded, you're not going to get that email. And so now you're going to be 2-3 weeks into the semester and think, oh, gosh, that's right, I signed up for that class. When am I supposed to go there? And then you realize, oh, geez, it's been 3 weeks and I've missed 3 assignments and you're already behind in that particular class. So go into MyQuesta. Look for the Student tab, look for the student email, go to your student email and set up the forwarding. Or just get on a habit of logging in and looking at your email, whatever works for you in that case. Since we're talking about email, I just want to mention a couple things about net etiquette, or how when you're using your email. It's really helpful to be sure that you always put a valid subject in the email. So if you're going to compose an email and send it to your instructor, you would send it to whatever your instructor's address or whoever it is you're sending the email to. And when you put the put a subject in here, don't leave the subject line blank. You know, put in here Health Ed 2 class assignment question, or Health Ed 2 class homework assignment 2. So, because instructors, many who teach online, get lots and lots of email. And so if they get an email in their inbox and there's no subject, they might skip right over it or think it's a spam or something like that. They may not recognize your email address, so put a subject in there. When you type in the body of the email, be sure that you always end with a signature, your name, again, or the name of the class, like, Dear Professor, attached is my assignment for such and such, Kevin Bontenball, Health Education 2. Because, again, they're getting lots and lots of email, and they teach sometimes many classes online. So they might recognize your name, but they may not remember, well, now which section of that class is this student in, or so. So the more information you can provide, the easier you make it for the instructor, the better off everyone's going to be. So always put a subject in of some sort that's meaningful, that they know what this email's about. And then in the body of your email, always end by putting your name. I can't tell you how many times I get emails from students and they don't include their name, and they're sending it from some email address that I have no idea who it is. I mean, the name that they chose for the email is not in any way connected to what their actual name is. And I'm supposed to figure out who this is from. I mean, you don't know. So you want to be clear, communicate clearly to your instructor or others when you're using email. Or even if you're on a discussion board, some of the classes you're going to take, discussion happens through an online discussion board where you log into the discussion board and you type in a response to a question or you reply to other responses. In that environment, you want to also provide your name at the end of your response. So if the instructor is reading through, they can see who it is that made that response, particularly if part of the grade in the class is dependent on you responding on the discussion board. I have discussion boards in some of the classes I teach, and occasionally a student will respond and they don't put their name. And I don't know who it is. You know, and I'm not going to email out the entire class and say, well, who provided this response? You know, it's really your responsibility as a student to be organized again and provide as much information as you can to help the instructor and yourself in the class. I want to talk a little bit about maybe saving files in different formats. You might encounter that in a class. And this has to do with, say, if you're typing up a paper, perhaps. So you're using a piece of software. Let me see if they have, like Microsoft Word. So let's say you're writing a term paper or you're writing an essay or something that's due for the class. You would type it up in Microsoft Word or some other word processing program that you may have. And then you're going to need to send it to the instructor. And usually that happens via attaching that file to an email that gets sent to your instructor. So not like in the face-to-face environment where you walk in when the paper's due and you've printed it out and you hand it in to your instructor. That's not the environment we're in online. So you're going to type up your paper, you're going to save it, and you're going to send it as an email attachment, typically, to your professor. So when you do that, you want to make sure you save it, and your instructor may have requirements for how they want the file sent, like they want it in a certain format or whatnot. You want to follow that. Otherwise, they may not be able to open it. For example, when you save something, if you come down here at the bottom of this window, you're going to save as type. So you're going to see all of these different types of formats that you could save your document in. Now, why this is important, because this is the latest version of Microsoft Word, which might be the version you have on your computer at home. But your instructor may have an older version of Microsoft Word. And so if you save it in this format, there could be a chance that they can't open it. You can open older versions into the newer versions, but you can't open newer version files into an older version of a piece of software. So, you know, you're going to have, then hopefully the instructor will provide that information to you, but you want to be aware of that. Word 97 through 2003 .doc, that's the older version. So sometimes it's wise that you might choose that. Or your instructor might ask, if you go through here, this rich text format. This is a common format that actually works between multiple different types of word processing programs. So this is a format that you might use if your instructor wants you to use that, or if you send a file and the instructor says, I can't open that, you might try to save it in rich text format and resend it, because this is more universal between different types of softwares, rich text format. So those are just some things that we don't think about in the face-to-face environment, because again, you type something up, you print it out, and you hand it in print form. That's not how it works in an online environment, so to be aware of that. And also the type of software you're using. This is Microsoft Word. You may have some other word processing program that saves it in some other format, and when you send it to your instructor, they don't have that software. They can't open it. They only have Microsoft Word. So those are things you might run into when you're in a distance education class that you didn't run into before. you took a distance education class. One last thing I wanted to mention, and then you can see if anyone has any questions, is I do actually teach a short Introduction to Online Courses course. It kind of, yeah, it makes you think, what? It's an online course to Introduction to Online? It's a little odd, even for me sometimes. But it's called Distance 101, DIST 101. And it kind of introduces students to different things they're going to encounter in an online class. So I'm going to see if I can bring up the course here just to show you. You can find it in the class schedule. Again, it's DIST, DIST 101. It's Introduction to Online. Guess I should have brought this up before, but here it is. So again, this course is it's a 3-week course. It's half a unit. It's taught at the beginning of each semester. It's taught during the summer. So it's a nice course for students who are thinking about taking online. They're not quite sure if they're going to be successful or not. You could take this course. It's self-paced. So even though it runs for 3 weeks, you can actually work through the course at your own pace. Is how I've set it up. And some students actually take it and finish all the assignments in one day. And it's obvious that they're pretty familiar with technology and they'll be successful in a course, in an online class. But some take, a little bit longer. But anyway, it has these different sections that you can go through to figure out if online's right for you. There's some helpful tips. There's things about using the web, using email, communicating online. So I just wanted to mention it. It's something you might think about. It's also listed on the handout that I provided for you here, Distance 101 course. Well, that's about all the information that I had to provide. So I wish you well and good luck in your online endeavors or adventures. And I actually work in the library, San Luis Obispo campus mostly. So if you're ever on that campus or you have questions, feel free to stop by and ask me or any of the other librarians there. Or you can find my name on the website for the library. Send me an email, and I'd be happy to try to answer your questions you might have.